Today, the 18th? 19th.
It is.
Let me get the right date. Okay, so I hereby call to order the July 18th, 2004 meeting of the Ware Ethics Committee, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any amendments to the agenda? I think I'm on here. Oh. All right, we have a copy of the minutes that were sent. Do we have any amendments?
Move they be approved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Great. All right, so under communications, we have a couple of digital complaints. So our first complaints. We do not have any other mail, paper mail, so the last time we had a inquiry, Eileen had suggested that I make a checklist because I can talk all over the place. So I threw together something, and this is gonna be, you know, trying the process that we've been talking about for a year and a half. Right?
A quick question before we
Certainly.
do this. Do you go non-public since there's names?
No, a complaint is public unless there's any reason to concern that there's information that should be non-public. I think that's a good point. So, I think y'all have had this, right? Do you have, have you had copies, Luke?
Had copies of what?
The complaints?
The two complaints?
Okay, well, we,
That
well,
was the attachment I said I didn't
Okay.
receive. So I'm reading it right now.
okay, so let's take a moment and read through that and see if there's any concerns about that would require this to be non-public. Thank you for that.
Wendy, what would a complaint have to contain for us to consider it non-public?
I think there were some things around employees and HR. I think we've talked a lot about what transparency versus people's reputations, so I don't,
Yeah, I thought we would just say what the complaints were about, like a rough
A vague
title,
one, yep.
Then you go non-public, discuss
So
the
that
parties
was-
involved.
that was our point. I'm sorry?
Wendy's gonna be calling you. She says it's 6 or 6:30, so we just started.
Oh, okay,
I said, do you have Wendy's number? And she said, okay.
okay. No, that's fine. So at one point, we were always going to go into non-public, and then there was a concern about transparency, that we only go into non-public when we must. And so, like I said, this is the first time we're sort of going through this, so I'm looking to all y'all for your opinions and
My
thoughts.
recollection, didn't we ask the attorney about that, and they said that it was a very limited set of circumstances that we could go into non-public for?
Correct.
And my review here, it seems to suggest these are public officials and public actions, so it doesn't look like we're talking about, anyway, that's,
Yep.
I shouldn't bias the discussion, but.
No. Anyone else have any other opinions as to non-public for this?
I'm just new to the whole.
No, and we
whole
all,
thing, and
like,
I just wanna make sure.
no, I appreciate that, and I think it's great that you're here because,
Wendy, she said she just tried and it went to most of
really,
But
can you give me her? See, I don't even show it showing up as a, 603, here.
I won't do it on TV.
Can you type it there? Thank you.
Greetings from Montreal.
Hello, hello. So will let the minutes note that we are all here now. I went and I got a Bluetooth speakerphone so that we can actually hear you communicate and participate. So everyone can hear you. We've been through the minutes, and what we were talking about right now is if there was anything in the complaints that arose to non-public.
Point of order.
Yes, certainly.
Madam Chairman, could you introduce to the audience who's on the phone, on the speaker?
Oh, I could certainly do that. So we got our last member, Meanie, just joined us through phone because she's away. Thank you for that. So, so we're just talking about, you have a copy of the complaints, yes?
I do not.
Oh, okay. Naomi, can you forward them to her? We have 2 digital complaints that we got a little bit ago. And right now, we're just deciding if it's public or if it's non-public. So we can wait till you have a copy, if you like.
Okay. If you would like to continue your discussion while waiting
Sure.
on that and reading,
Sure,
by all
sure,
means,
sure.
go ahead.
Okay.
Well, one thing, you may be able to help us recall, we had previously, this was part of the discussion that Carl had brought up a moment ago, we had previously taken a position that we were gonna open all communications in private, and then we went to the town attorney. And if you could affirm my recollection anyway, that we were instructed that, except in very rare cases, it should be public hearings, that there were very rare exceptions having to do with HR and things of that nature. But that routine ones, particularly where they would talk about people in their official capacity, were not private or non-public sessions. Is that your recollection?
That is my recollection, and I also, I haven't seen yet a copy of the complaint, but if the copy of the complaint has anything to do with somebody who's an elected official,
Yes.
then it should happen in the public forum.
Okay.
That was my recollection. Luke, is that what you remember?
It is?
Okay. All right. So we're going to discuss this one in public, yes?
Okay.
So Franklin Fillmore put in a complaint against several of the selectmen, Janice Matthews, there's actually 2, but this is Janice Matthews, David Pratt, and Salim Bloom.
Would it be helpful if I were to read the actual complaint from the first one? We take them one at a time like that? Just so
Sure.
that everyone out there
Yep.
knows what we're talking about. So these were filed on, they are on ECD1 Ethics Code Violation Complaint, filed by Mr. Franklin B. Fillmore Jr. I'm not gonna read his address, phone information. Person against whom the complaint you're filing, David Pratt, Selectman. Applicable provisions of the Ethics Codes, item 1, 2, and 4 of the responsibility section were violated. Please describe the specific conduct. Am I reading the right one first?
That's fine.
It's fine.
Please describe the specific conduct that is alleged to be a violation of the Ware Ethics Code, be as specific as possible, include dates and times, etc. And the filing person wrote, on May 13th and again on June 17th, Selectman Pratt participated in a vote for the zoning board membership both for and against a volunteer. Selectman Pratt participated in this vote knowing full well that he had a case coming up before the ZBA. The case was on the ZBA agenda prior to the June 17th vote for 2 new members, changing the complexion of the board completely. The result was that Selectman Pratt is trying to appoint members that will vote in favor of the zoning board meetings. And that is the body of the complaint, and it is signed and dated 6/20/24. Shall I read the second? Since they are related.
Sure.
All right, so the second filing, and this is not necessarily in order, but by the same complainant, Franklin Fillmore Jr., person against whom you are filing this complaint, Janet Matthews, David Pratt, and Salem Bloom, selectmen. Applicable provisions of the code, items 1 and 2 of the responsibility section were violated. Please describe the specific conduct that is alleged to be a violation. I'll jump to the body. On June 17th, Selectmen Matthews, Pratt, and Bloom participated in the affirmative a vote to elect a member to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, knowing full well that the individual had recently sued the town for actions of the ZBA and lost the suit and subsequent appeal. That person is not suitable to serve on the ZBA due to a blatantly obvious negative bias towards the board. Selectmen Matthews, Pratt, and Bloom knowingly did not disclose these facts to other new board members of this lawsuit, thereby swaying other board members to blindly vote in the affirmative. End of submission. Also signed and dated 6/20/24.
Okay, so do we want to take these one at a time? I assume so.
Yes.
Okay, so the first one, let's see, so, Eileen, you're our process person, I'm really hoping you can keep me honest. I made a rough checklist because last time
Okay.
I was sort of talking through things and went too fast. So, based on ECP 1, it seems like the first one was, does the complaint fall within the jurisdiction of the Town of Ethics, Town of Ware Ethics Committee? So, do we have thoughts on that?
I'm gonna need to compare these against the actual, the code.
The Code of Ethics?
You're right,
Yeah.
to see specifically what the, I don't have it.
Well, so we've already, just Wendy, for process purposes, we've identified that the filer lives in the town of Ware. All of that in terms of checklists. So the complaint was written in a way that we can accept. The complainant lives in the town of Ware and thus is able to file. And the subject matter is relevant to town of Ware operations. So all that
That's
got
true.
vetted, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. And so now, Luke, if I understand what you're doing, you're taking the Ware Code of Ethics and looking to see what the violations would be for that first complaint, which is against Mr. Pratt.
Eileen, there's a section in the form that says, please describe what actions you have taken to resolve the situation within Ware Town government before bringing it before the Ethics Committee. And the complainant did not fill anything in here. Is there some sort of obligation on the complainant's part to try to resolve this prior to coming to the Ethics Committee?
It's a good question. I think we had talked about whether or not a person took every step they could before getting here, so it's a really good point, Neil. And so that might be for both of these part and parcel, but I think to Luke's point about determining whether or not, there is anything that we would see as a violation, even so is an important part of it. So I think it's
Right.
at both ends.
Right, I think,
So a quick question on the form itself. Are those check marks automatically put in there? Or does the complainant put those check marks as he's going through that form?
so we have a process by which we go through any complaints. And the questions that I wrote for checklists, and we're talking through all of them now, was, does it fall within our jurisdiction? And if so, which specific area of ethics in the Code of Ethics were alleged to be violated? When did this occur? Have they availed themselves of all possible avenues? Is the complainant signed by a Ware resident? And then what are our next steps? And so we're sort of talking about all of those, which is great. But that's our checklist?
But
The question
that-
is that there's
You see the
check
check,
marks
the
there.
check marks to the left.
Oh.
Is
Would those put their
is there a
version
box
individual?
that he has to check and then that makes that check mark exist?
Oh, yeah.
Right, I haven't done the electronic form, I haven't gone on.
That's a good
Great
question.
Because down at the bottom, he's signing,
Right,
the
I
statements
believe-
below, and I believe he has to do a checkbox for each of those
I believe you're right.
marks.
Right.
I don't know the answer to that, if you have to click a box.
Well, so do you have the form yet, ma'am?
I do, I'm looking at it.
So you see that they're checked, right?
Yes, I do.
Do we have a blank form?
So if he filled it out online, I don't know if they've added check boxes. I think we used to have a place where you could just
Right,
on the
right,
di-
so the situation being, if the individual filing this checked those, saying, yes, I did these things,
Right.
then they are attesting that they did those things.
Right.
If we are looking
Yeah.
for further information, we could certainly, talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's on every form that they're all automatically checked, then it kind of
Correct.
may be confusing.
It was not automatically on the original PDF, I
Oh,
believe.
yeah. On
So-
the form on the website,
Yep.
the check marks are already there.
Oh, okay, okay.
So we need to
We need to fix
change that
that.
form, so
Yep.
they have to do something with that box for each individual statement there.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Very
that's
good
something we need
catch.
to clean up on that.
Okay, maybe I don't have the code of ethics. Well, since you're online, can you go through the code, bring up the code of ethics as well?
Here,
I
here's
have
the
to
code.
go to ethics, I have it here if you want.
So Luke was looking for it, and I was just
If
going
you
through my
could,
digital copies.
I'm trying to get online on the website, and I'm not having any luck with my iPad.
So he had for his complainant, he had items 1 and 2, with the 1 and 2 on both complaints, and then 1, 2, and 4 on the complaint, just with Selectman Pratt.
Right.
There was the individual
Of the responsibility, I see.
complaint. And responsibility, number 1, it says, I serve the community with dignity and respect, as well as being an agent of the democratic process. Item 2 is, I consider carefully the impact of my actions on public confidence. I maintain integrity at all times and consistently do what I believe is in the best interest of the community. And then responsibility number 4, I do not use my office or the resources of the town for personal or political gain of myself, my family, friends, or associates. So those are the 3 sections of the responsibility, part of the ethics code.
Okay, so not deciding on the merit, right, because we haven't had a trial, but it sounds like Mr. Fillmore has ethical concerns based on the code of ethics, and he's identified those, right, on his complaint. So I think that checks our first box. Then when, he said when, and then to Neil's concern, has he availed himself of all possible avenues? So the form suggests that he assumes that, but it's not clear. We have to fix that. I can,
For example, it specifically says, bring the matter of the complaint to the attention of the individuals involved. There's no indication here that he went to the Board of Selectmen and raised the issue with them.
And I looked at the 2 meetings on the June 17th and then one on May 13th, and I didn't see him in attendance or speaking at those meetings.
okay.
Naomi,
Yeah,
can you hear me?
Yep,
for sure.
Yes,
Did Mr. Fillmore come to public comment
He did.
on this issue?
He came to public comment, but I don't remember what night.
yeah.
Okay. I seem to remember a public comment about it. I could be wrong, but I think there was.
okay.
So, as far as steps for the board, it seems to me that one of the things we should do is look at, what do we do in these areas, have the power to investigate? So the first thing would be to ask the questions we're asking right here. So I
We
would
need to
suggest-
contact the
I would
complainant.
suggest that we write down a list of questions that the board has and then send a representative or have somebody from the board contact the individual and say, we need clarification on these points in order to proceed.
I agree. That's,
Does that sound reasonable to everyone?
Yes.
So it seems to me, obviously, the question, or the question we would be asking is, can we have, can you tell us specifically what you did to address each of these check marks in this first box? Which is in terms of attempting to address the complaint?
mhm.
If there were any other, and if not, what's the explanation?
Mhm.
Just the 20th, so 5/20, I turned in a comment.
5:20, he did public
The
comment.
action, I think when I listened to you, the action that he is.
May
the action
13th.
happened on 5/13.
Right.
5/13
On
and
5/20, he's on page 2, discussing how the appointment was handled unprofessionally and unfathomably, unfathomably.
so that is, right there, an indication that he did in fact address it with.
On 5/20, what was the other date?
Well, the second date
June
is-
17th
Yeah,
was
the
the other
17th.
date that he talked about.
That was just
Or
with,
the other complaint.
so, right.
May 13th and June 17th of 2024 were the two dates. that
So
he-
the one with the entire select board was about June 17th.
Right.
And
So-
the only time they met after that was July 8th, and I don't, those aren't posted yet. They should
Okay.
post it, because that was before I left, and they didn't meet again while I was gone.
And then I'd just like to bring up one other thing. I saw that the Board of Selectmen did a amendment to the Town of Ware, New Hampshire policy on boards, committees, and commissions on May 6th. Did they change anything as how appointments were made, for the different boards? This was all signed by the current.
I would submit that that's premature right now, because we haven't even talked about picking up the complaint for us to talk
Right.
about the board, the select board's processes. In my opinion, would be premature until we decide if we're gonna move forward with the case. That would be part
Oh,
of the
right,
investigation.
I'm just saying, this is supposed to be how they're supposed to handle
Understand,
appointments.
understand, and that it may very well be directly related to this, but I just think procedurally it's out of order.
Okay.
Sure. All right. So there is not a public comment where he spoke to this about the June 17th issue. So it sounds like the next step is to talk to Mr. Fillmore and see what he's done to address these issues. Is there any
Are
other?
we talking strictly about the Pratt complaint, or are we talking about both
I
complaints?
think both complaints
I
are
think
June
it
17th,
both.
right?
Seems to be that both of them are the same, because, and also as a note to self for ourselves is we need to correct that form so that
Mhm.
the checkbox has to be
Right.
selected, and then from that point, we can assume that, that someone selecting it did so affirmatively.
Right. Mhm. All right, so I don't mind reaching out to Mr. Fillmore, I can certainly do that. Is this then tabled until we have this or any other information,
Well,
or would you think?
what I'd like to know is just for
Yeah,
refresher, because we haven't
yeah.
talked about this for a little bit, looking at what our next steps are supposed to be. And that is, we first make a determination whether it's covered, whether the issue is covered, and then,
Then we have a pre-hearing
Right.
with we notify the people who have been mentioned, and then we have a pre-hearing individually with the complainant and it's not defendant, the respondent,
subject, yeah.
right? And that's mostly around scheduling and making sure people have the paperwork that they need. And then we schedule the hearing after that. So, I'm not sure if, this is where I rely on you and Eileen, process-wise. I mean, I know we have a blocker. Is there any more we can do with that? Can we discuss, we think if he's done this, that it seems a subject for us, or do we want
No,
to stop
I don't
until we
think- I
have the
don't-
information?
I think
Okay.
if there's something like that that's fundamental to our process that they haven't, that we're not satisfied with, we don't, it would be inappropriate to get further down the road in
Okay.
talking about the facts of the case. So our next meeting is what, in
August
August?
Next month.
16,
August
16, yeah, 15, 16, third Thursday. So that is the second question. Is this something timely that we need to have a special meeting, or are we, this goes to the next month, and then if we decide to schedule a hearing in between, we do?
Well, but
Let's assume for the moment that Bruce provides sufficient information to indicate that he's tried to resolve this and brought the matter. Bruce Fillmore.
B, gotcha.
Yeah.
I don't know the gentleman.
And assuming he does that, or it says, I haven't, or I couldn't, or here's the reason why I shouldn't have to, you're saying at that point, we would decide whether this is appropriate?
That was my question.
No, I think if, from what I'm seeing, if we were to see that this individual had in fact satisfied whatever our bar is for resolving this at the lowest level, then we would move to the next step, which is to schedule the discussion with them. And then maybe have a discussion about what other forms of inquiry or investigation under the Ethics Committee shall, Section A of our process, as it exists at the moment.
As a practical matter, if we were to decide now that this complaint does not fall within our jurisdiction, then it's sort of silly to have Bruce answer the question that Wendy's going to ask him. So, should we not take the next step and say, yes, assuming everything else is done, this is, or no, this is not within our jurisdiction? I understand
So
your...
basing that entire discussion based on just the terms of what they've submitted, if these things were to be true, would that fall under our purview?
Right.
Yes. I think that's a fair discussion.
And I don't know that we can determine truth just
No,
by
no,
on
no,
account that
no.
he's addressed it,
No,
right?
I'm just saying, we're not establishing that anything is true, but to Neil's point, if there were something that were, if the person's complaint were not related in an appropriate way to the ethics to a violation of the ethics code, we could say, regardless of the facts of the case, this isn't ours
Right.
to deal with.
Right.
Right.
So the discussion would be, if this were to be, if, given these circumstances that are alleged, would that circumstance come to us, given what the ethics?
Right.
So what I would, on the face of it, I would say yes. However, part of the questions might, in that first phase might also make that, change that position, because this is a very small amount of information here. It's just a few lines. And it suggests that this person is establishing that there was some inappropriate appointments made for personal or political gain. And that clearly would fall under, if that were an official act of someone, that would fall under the ethics code as it exists today, unless anyone disagrees.
No, I agree. I guess what I'm wondering is if, depending on how Bruce answers how he's addressed this, that doesn't change the facts that he laid out, right?
Right,
So-
what it might do is it might defer any action on our part until he makes such an attempt.
Sure.
But we should only ask him to make such an attempt if
If
we've
we-
determined that, in fact, what he is alleging does fall within
Would fall under our
purview of
purview.
the committee.
Right.
There. All right, so that's our discussion at this point, right? So Luke's addressed, he thinks it does. What do other people think?
I don't have the code in front of me, but I'm wondering if, Luke, if, it looks like you were trying to align it to the code. Can you
Yes, I can
tell me
read,
which?
let me read,
Yeah.
I'll read you the sections of the code
And
that
just
are
for your
being referenced.
clarification, he did call out provisions 1, 2 on one of them and 1,
Right.
2, and 4 on the other. So
Right,
so
right.
Luke will read
So
that.
I'll be
Responsibility
specific.
section.
Yes, I'll be
Thank you.
specific and talk about, first off, we're talking about the complaint regarding David Pratt. This person alleges item 1 of the responsibility. Item 1 says, "I serve the community with dignity and respect, as well as being an agent of the democratic process." Item 2, I consider carefully the impact of my actions on public confidence. I maintain integrity at all times and consistently do what I believe is in the best interest of the community. And item 4, I do not use my office or the resources of the town for personal or political gain of myself, my friends, or excuse me, my family, friends, or associates. So if I could continue, looking at this one again regarding Mr. Pratt, is he's suggesting that there was some bias in the person, something that affected this gentleman's personal situation, and he should have at least disclosed that.
If you look further into the code, under honesty, the very first part of the number 1 of honesty, I am honest with all whom I interact in my official capacity. I will disclose any matters that might present a conflict of interest and will recuse myself when appropriate.
And-
So there's a conflict, they're saying there's a conflict because this person had some known knowledge and he did not make it known to the other board members.
Understand, which brings up an interesting question for procedurally, because if we are saying the applicable provisions, the question being, does the individual out there, the layperson in the community, do they have to lay out all of the potential violations of their situation? Or is this body,
We determine.
would we determine that, well, in addition to, or, that's not the right section, this is the right section, or maybe add more to it? I don't know the answer to that, and I'm not sure this is the place to do that. So what I would suggest, just from here, for this discussion, in terms, to Neil's point of going forward with asking this person to submit more information, if under the situation involving Mr. Pratt, would these actions, in our mind, be related to potential deviations from, for lack of a better term, the referenced sections?
I would hope that we would take a broad view of this and not try to decline to accept a complaint because the individual cited the wrong section or didn't cite
I
the
agree.
correct section. So, to me, maybe it's 1, 2, and 4 of the responsibility section, maybe it's the section that Carl mentioned, maybe it's some other section. I hope we would not refuse to
Reject it,
accept a
yeah.
complaint because of the lack of specificity on the part of the complainant about which section of the code was violated.
Trivial, yes.
Basically, this
Administrative.
person is saying there is an ethical violation here, and here are the facts,
Right.
and this is what I think is the section of the code that was violated. I have no problem with going forward with this, so that I think it's important that Bruce respond and give us the technical information. But once we get that, and assuming we think that that's adequate, okay, that he did whatever a reasonable person would do to try to settle the matter before bringing it to the committee, I think we then would go forward with the complaint, and we should tell him that his complaint is valid, or, excuse me, his complaint is an appropriate one to bring before this committee.
Right. So again, I I'll try and recapture that in fewer words for me.
Thank you.
So what you're suggesting, Neil, is that just, again, based on the complaints that the individual did identify, our reading of the ethics code and the body of the complaint, if these things were, as we said, after an investigation shown to be factual, that they would represent something that would fall under the purview of the ethics committee complaint process. And I think that at this point, I can say yes certainly on this one here. I'll have to look at the other one. But, to Carl's point, there may be more that comes out of the discussion, but I think that would be downstream.
Okay. So at this point, and Eileen, keep me honest, are we gonna vote to say Wendy needs to get more information about what he's done to address this, but in theory, it appears this falls into our purview, or is that just a discussion?
I think that's just a discussion.
Okay,
Could we not accept it pending a response?
okay,
And just say, we think that based on what we see, it's appropriate, but we need to clarify. And then the caveat to that acceptance would be that if the individual had not done what is required under the process, that they would go back and do those steps and then reapproach the
We
board.
just want to reaffirm the check boxes,
yep,
that
Yeah.
they've been done. If they've been done, we should proceed under our
Right.
okay.
guidance.
All agreed on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Eileen?
Yes.
Okay, so there's two things. So I'll reach out timeline-wise, right? And then also, we need to work on fixing the form online. So got that. Given the timeline, does this then come back and we start talking about the pre-hearing a month from now? Or is there something, if I forward you the information, can we decide whether or not we want to schedule a pre-hearing before next month?
Well, remind me, can we share information only among the entire board?
We can share it one way, we
Right.
can't have a discussion.
So if you were to get information regarding a response, you could share it with everyone on the board.
Right.
And then,
And would that response be public and part of our minutes, or in some way available to the general public?
I would think so,
If it's
yeah.
in, yep, if
Have-
part of the right to know, for sure. Then we move to the pre-hearing. So the one question, remind me, Eileen, so if we have a quorum of the board there, that's a noticed meeting, right? So do we do the pre-hearing with a subcommittee to get that information, since the pre-hearing is really about timelines and sharing information? Or do we do a board meeting and then we go into non-public?
I honestly think that, and I understand that you're balancing expediency with, process, right?
Mhm.
So, but I think, to keep ourselves honest, right, as information becomes available and we're having that discussion with Mr. Fillmore, we would then have to make decisions about, for our own process,
Okay.
about, is there anyone who should not be a part of the decision-making on this? Is there, all of that type of
Sure.
stuff. So I don't know that a subset, especially this one being the first one out the gate,
Sure.
is probably, is the best way to proceed. My suggestion would be to pull this all together as much as we could,
Okay.
for everyone to be able to be available. But I'm open to other people's thoughts on that, but I do think, just as this is our first complaint,
Yep,
it might be important to walk through the process together.
okay, that makes sense. Anyone else have thoughts?
Yeah, so that makes sense to me. The question of timeline between now and then, I mean, unless we were to call a special meeting and do the appropriate announcements, which I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to, but would have to, make sure that that was handled
Right.
appropriately for public notification. If there were, for example, if we learned immediately that, yes, all those boxes had been checked, then we might, convene long enough to schedule the next step so that it's not waiting a full month. And I would be open to that if it were,
Is there some,
possible.
is there some need for speed here? Is
I
there
don't-
some consequence
I
that would
don't know
happen?
the answer to that. Yeah, I'm just saying if there is if the body, our body, feels like there's a need for moving this forward more quickly than the next regularly scheduled meeting, that would be the process to do it. Do I personally feel that need? Not based on what I see here. I don't have enough information to do much more than we've already discussed. Ask more
I don't
questions.
think there's any life or death kind of.
Seems like the decisions are already made,
By
right?
the zoning board or the planning board and zoning board getting together on some action that he's worried about. Or
Right.
the bias.
Okay, all right, so I can get information, we can set, if based on that information, I have no concerns from anyone else that we're not ready to move forward. It seems like, if I recall, I mean, we had 2 different non-publics, right? So that we weren't putting both parties into one meeting. So our next meeting would have a non-public with Bruce and a non-public with
David?
David for this one. And then David, Janice, and Celine for the other one. So would that be 3 non-publics? Because there's 2 complaints?
They'd have to be individual, we'd have to have separate ones for each of the selectmen on that 3-person,
Would we? Why?
would we?
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering, because it was a public meeting where this happened, right? So they're all on the same
On the
board.
non-public, to get their,
Oh, so, I'm sorry, so
Response.
the pre-hearing, there's no sharing of facts. It's
Okay.
just, when
Okay,
can we
I
schedule a
thought we were
meeting,
going into-
letting them, no,
okay, on the pre-hearing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
right, so
fine.
that one we can do, I don't know if it's 2 or 3, so I don't know if, maybe just 2.
Maybe inquire of the, since it would obviously be 1 on the one side,
Yep,
and maybe make an inquiry of the other 3 since they're all on the same board and see what
Sure.
their preference is.
mm-hmm.
You know, 'cause I
And,
don't,
and so also, that means before our meeting, I need to send notice, right, to the selectmen that are called out here. So I think, this is Dreaming Up Process Live, right? So I think what we're talking about is we confirm, assuming Bruce has availed himself to everything, we don't have a concern, then at our next meeting, we'll have the non-public pre-hearings, have our meeting, at which time we'll schedule a hearing, assuming we keep moving forward. Right, that sound accurate?
it does to me.
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. Okay, got this. Good. This is exciting, not exciting because it's sad whenever we need to have an ethics
But as an
complaint
exercise of the
hearing.
process.
But it's something we've all been very passionate about and working very hard for a year and a half. It's interesting to have the rubber hit the road and sort of work through our process, so that part is cool. Okay, so I will reach out to Bruce tomorrow, and I'll let you know what I hear, and then we'll move forward with that. Good with that subject? Okay, there are no other mail, so this was the only one. The other, we did get a response from the lawyer on the, her thoughts on is the process of the Code of Ethics, was that voted on or not?
We did?
We did. Let me find it.
The implementation part of the,
She said,
our question was for the, Ware Ethics Code implementation, pages 2 and 3.
Would you like me to read this aloud?
Sure,
Okay, so this was from Laura Spector Morgan from the Attorney Mitchell Municipal Group. Thank you, Municipal Group, to Naomi Bolton. On June 3rd, Naomi, you sent me an email on January 31st with 3 attachments. Do you still have, oops, sorry, let me skip over that, doesn't seem relevant. Oh, no, it does, actually. In reviewing them, it seems to me that the document entitled Ware Ethics Code Implementation was adopted by the Ethics Committee, not the town meeting, or not town meeting, and was intended to be essentially the rules of procedure by which the committee would operate. If my conclusion is correct, those rules are binding on the committee, but can be changed just as any other board could change its rules of procedure. I would recommend that the board discuss proposed changes at public meetings and then hold a public hearing ruling on the proposed changes before formally adopting them. Please let me know if I can be of additional assistance. Over.
All right.
I have to say that I think this opinion is wildly inaccurate. And I would like to see one from Mr. Mitchell himself.
I can't do that, he's retired. He left months ago. Can't do that.
If this is correct, as I've said before, then our election as board members is invalid because the procedure by which we were elected is established by the implementation section. If the and clearly we cannot create an implementation section that determines how we get elected. That's something the town had to do, and which was done in 2006 through the implementation section, which was attached to the code and available in the clerk's office.
So,
So, we cannot, in my view, we cannot change, as a board, we cannot change the implementation. If we want to change it, we go back to the town and propose an amendment to it and see what how the town votes.
Go ahead.
so this was the question that I brought to the Board of Selectmen, and it was presented to the attorney. The town attorney, the organization hired to represent the town, has given us their position. So I'm not sure that as members of the board, we're in a position to overrule the town attorney on this, and that if there were a challenge to be made to that decision, it wouldn't be in this body. It would probably be at the selectmen, unless I'm misunderstanding the way these things work, that to challenge what you're suggesting, that if what you're suggesting is true and these rules are binding and can only be changed by vote of the town, that would not be a question that is answered by this board. First of all, we would have a direct conflict of interest in answering that question, right? We are the elected persons, and we would be trying to make a determination about our own election process as to whether it was valid, and clearly none of us had anything to do with the creation, whether it was something that went before the town or something done by the committee itself. We weren't party to those conversations. So we're left with the record such as it is. And being that the record, has been reviewed by council, I would suggest that if anybody, member of this board or any other person, objects to the way that the attorney has characterized our ability to change these rules, that they would approach it through that avenue. But for our purposes, we as a board said we would take this, and I assumed that we would then accept the position of the town attorney as being that of the town officially.
This is moot unless some one of us is proposing to change the implementation process
I
in some
believe
way.
that's how, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I believe that was why we asked the question, and what it had to do with, to bring it in, from the abstract to the concrete, it had to do with us trying to figure out, how we were going to implement the training section.
Right.
And how frequently, and so on and so forth. And so I think we were trying to determine if we had any latitude around that training section.
Correct. That's what I recall.
Right, but then that was when Neil brought up the point that we brought to the attorney, which is if we, then wherein are the processes for electing the members of this committee contained, and where were they, sanctioned by whatever the appropriate body is, the town, and so that's, sort of part and parcel, because again, they're all contained in the same document. They're different sections of the same document.
So the town of Dunbarton, that we kind of mimicked or followed their ethics committee guidelines structure. A few years back, and I think it was 2011, 2014, they changed their code of ethics document, and it was just for a discrimination part of the clause, or equal opportunity, one of those wording things. It was just a change for that, but they voted
Yes.
for that.
The code of ethics was voted on by the.
Right, that's
Fine.
clearly
That
a
was the code of
distinction.
ethics.
Right, and that's a clear distinction. The code of ethics itself, there's no question that that was voted by the
It's
town.
this other part we're
It's this
dealing
other
with,
document.
the implementation document. If
Yeah,
we want to change it,
Well-
the town attorney is saying we can do that.
if we
as
vote as a board, because what they are saying is that this was not part of the vote before the town. Neil's point being that there are processes included in this that suggest how to elect the members of this board, and then therefore, if those could be modified, we could theoretically modify our own, terms, for example. We could say we're gonna be here
Permanent
for,
members.
give ourselves immunity or some such thing.
Get paid.
Right.
No, I'm just joking.
So,
No.
right, no, but all of those things, so it's, again, it's a fair point, which is why we asked the question. And now we got an answer that says we can change them. So the question, what I would suggest to Neil is, I think that your point would be more in order were someone to propose changing one of those formation of the ethics committee issues around voting before the town, but not necessarily in the processes after that, the education, for example, if we were going to change providing the education in the spring to the fall.
Once a year. instead of-
I'm sorry, Luke, I fundamentally disagree with that. As you may not know, the town is in the process of, either has or will put out an RFP for new attorneys. I suspect, assuming we get a different set of attorneys, if the same question were asked and all the documentation's given, you would get the different answer.
Well, again, of
So-
course, I'm not privy to that information, but one more time, I don't think that's the purview of this board to overrule whoever the existing representative of the town is. If the guidance for the town changes and a new attorney comes in and says, strike that, reverse it, move forward, that would be a situation. But all I'm suggesting is we as a board, this is the representative of the town as we know it today. We don't always agree with the government that's in place at the moment, but we do have to make a call for strikes and falls
Right.
on the decisions.
Let's get down to details. Are you going to propose any changes in the implementation section?
Today?
At any time?
Oh,
Is that your intention?
I can't answer that question, no.
All right, so I did put on that I wanted us to look at the legal response, which we have. There's a difference of opinion on the validity of that, for sure. But I don't see that anybody's making, I don't know, I could be wrong. Is anybody making a motion to change the process?
Not tonight.
No.
Not tonight.
No.
No.
All right. So that was more for your information, and it's good that we're sort of talking through it. Any more on that subject? No, okay. Then the last one was spring training, which again, I don't know, given this, it seems like we have some flexibility. I don't know, has anyone done anything with the spring training now that it's midsummer?
Well, our last discussion was that it would be a moot point to proceed, given the question that was before the attorney, because if the question came back opposite of what we have, we might not exist, or we might, there might have been a ruling that we were procedurally out of order or something. So I have certainly not made any movement on that.
Okay. Does anyone have any thoughts about our next steps in what we should do with the spring training?
So as a recap, we had a presentation, sort of a PowerPoint presentation that was done, and we had talked about potentially posting that and making it accessible to employees of the town and people on the boards.
Right.
I think that, I certainly wouldn't have an objection to putting something like that out, in addition to the frequently asked questions, for example, so that at least in the interim, if the board agrees that that's appropriate, that we could put that up there so that there would be at least some, developing awareness of the process.
I think, Eileen, keep me honest here. I think the concern was, did we want to post it until we had done a dry run? Maybe not.
I think that was the last discussion. You had sent,
That was May,
just in terms of where we were at with it, you had sent me your final draft. I had done a little bit of cleanup on it, nothing major. There was nothing substantial that was changed. And so for purposes of August, I think we can bring it back forward and then move, make the decision as to whether or not we're going to post it at that meeting, if that makes sense. Take
Okay.
one last look at it and then, put it forward to vote if we're going to post it.
Do we want to do a dry run with some other group of people before we even post it? You said, I thought the plan was finalize our presentation, do a dry run with a group that
We had talked about that back in May.
And I think what I heard Eileen say was, we haven't voted on her amended version, so we might bring it up in August, make sure we're all good, and then we could do,
Then we could do either. We could decide at that time to post it and/or do a dry run first, So either way, I think that would be a good discussion there, but
But Neil's point, it's important to get our information out there for it.
Absolutely.
If we got
Sure.
something for them to learn from
Yep.
and use, we
Yep.
should get that tool out there
I agree.
as soon as possible.
I agree. I don't have a problem with posting something that we all agree to as a starting
We
point,
could
and
still
then,
post it as a draft.
yeah, as a work in progress, as everything
Right
is,
now,
it
to
turns
be
out.
on there as a draft
Right.
and not approved. It's just a draft, and then I'm hoping that we get input from the town employees and committee members and board members.
Eileen, do you have thoughts on that?
I think that's fine. I'm open to either option.
Okay.
So what, in either case, if we do either one of those, what it means is that we'll come to the next meeting prepared to vote on accepting what we have for either publication on the website or a trial run or both.
I'll just need the markup from Eileen, or
Right.
or if you put it in, she have access to the Google document folder?
No, I think she had her own copy, because I think I had done things in Google Documents, and I think she did.
Eileen, if you could send that to Wendy, then I
Distribute.
can send it to Naomi for putting it on the web.
We don't put it on the web till we approve it in August.
In August?
Right, yeah.
Okay, after our August meeting,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
okay. All right. Good. Is there any other topics? Hearing none, I will close the June 18th, 2024 meeting of the Wareham Ethics Committee.
And our next meeting will be August 15th
15th,
at 6 o'clock p.m.
I believe so. Yep.
Same bat location.
Are you done?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy Montreal.
Thank you.